We are very pleased to have Meredith Hall with us. She's going to read from her new novel, Beneficience. We'll do a question and answer at the end, so if you have a question, you can always pop that question into the chat, or you can raise your hand when we get to that point, and I'd be happy to call on you. And if you would like to turn your cameras on, that's also great. We were talking before we got started here about how we love to see people's faces just to make these virtual events a little bit more interactive. So if you feel like turning your camera on, please do that. Okay, Meredith Hall, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As you probably know, Meredith is an award-winning memoirist. Her book, Without a Map, documented her life growing up and becoming pregnant at the young age of 16 in 1965 and the aftermath of that. The book was a New York Times bestseller. It was a book sense selection from the independent bookstore, American Booksellers Association. The Kirkus Reviews named it a best book of 2007, as did Elle Magazine, and O Magazine called it a memoir that we love. So a much revered memoir. This is Meredith's first novel, so we're very pleased to be offering this up to you tonight. The book will be coming out a little bit later than planned. A lot of things are delayed right now because of COVID and Chinese trade relations and paper shortages and all kinds of fun stuff affecting the publishing world. So the book will be coming out in October. You're more than welcome to check that out on our website. Our website is Bookworks without the O's, so that's BKWRKS.com. You can find Meredith's book and just about anything else your little book-loving heart desires. So please do check that website out. That's how we're operating right now, with direct-to-home shipment. If you live in Albuquerque, you can pick up books 4 days a week. And hopefully here in the next month or so, we'll be open for some pre-holiday seasonal shopping once we get our COVID-safe practices all in order. So, all right, Meredith Hall. She was the recipient of the 2004 Gift of Freedom Award from a Room of Her Own Foundation. And at that time, she came to New Mexico and spent a lot of time here and was able to teach some classes up in Albuquerque. We were talking about that program, and she was telling me how it really changed her life as a writer. She is Professor Emerita of the MFA program at the University of New Hampshire. And again, we're pleased to be with her tonight, helping launch her new novel into the world. Meredith Hall, would you like to read a little bit to us tonight and tell us more about your debut work, your debut novel, I should say?
Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I realized as I prepared for tonight that I had done an event at Bookworks when my memoir came out. So it's very nice to return to Bookworks. Thank you very much. So people, the publishing industry is in a crazy state right now. My publication date was pushed out from September 8th to October 6th. So none of you have even seen the book. And I thought that I would let you see the cover. There is Beneficience with all my tags. I apologize for that. But this is the novel. And hopefully you'll all have it in your hands in a week or two. So. This novel is, it takes place in Maine. I'm thinking what I can tell you about it without harming your reading experience, telling you just enough. It takes place in a small town in Maine, Alstead. It's about the Center family. It starts in the late 1940s and runs through the mid 1960s. And it takes place on a farm that has been in Top Center's family for many, many generations. And he took it over when his father died. And by that time, it had been through the Depression. His father was not an enthusiastic farmer, and it was in real disrepair. And Top and his new wife, Doris, move on to the farm and working very, very hard. They bring this farm back into tremendous productivity. It's a dairy farm. And they have 3 children, Sonny, their oldest, Dodie, a girl in the middle, and Beston, a younger son. It's a story, I went into this writing because I got very interested in what happens when tragedy, when a terrible event hits us. And I thought about a family that is very intact. There's an unusual level of love and tenderness and devotion in this family. And I wondered, even with a family like that, what happens when something awful comes into the family from sort of the outside, something they were completely unprepared for. And I wanted to watch this family and see what the effect of that kind of grief is and what the tools are that this family might find to either, the question for me was, would they be able to find their way through that event? And you know from the title Beneficence that I am most interested in the generosity of heart and our ability to draw on the best of us, our greatest strengths. And in this family, one of the greatest strengths for certain is their love, and pull ourselves through events that come into our lives. So that's what it is. It's really a study of this family. They are all storytellers. There are a lot of stories in this book. They are rememberers. They like to talk about things that happened, small events, big events. I thought I would, the book really takes place on this farm and in their home. It takes place in the fields, the barn, the apple orchard, along the creek that runs through their fields and woods and eventually many miles away. It's called Center Creek after this family, eventually runs to the sea. And inside this house, and we live so intimately in this house with the family that we get to know the house very well. The home itself, the interior of this old house plays very significantly in the events of this story. I think that I will just start to read, and I'm going to read in each of these voices. The book is structured in 4 parts. Before, during, after, and here. And throughout the book, right from the beginning, there are 3 voices. There are 3 characters who have voice. Doris, the wife and mother, Dodie, who is that middle child, and Tup, the father and husband. So I'm going to start with Doris. This is the very beginning of the book. It takes place in 1947. And she is really serving to introduce us to this world that I've just described. Every morning early, when Tup and I get up to start our chores, the whole house still quiet and the children asleep, I turn and pull the bed together, tugging at the sheets to make them tight and smooth. They are warm with our heat. I slide my hand across the place my husband slept, drawing the blankets up and closing in the warmth like a memory of us until night comes when we will lie down together again. Our room has big windows on the back of the house, looking out on the near pasture and the creek running through it. It is very nice to stand first thing every morning looking out over the land. The trees along the hayfields look like ghosts some summer mornings when the ground fog hugs the warm earth. And then the mist slowly drifts up and away so that by the time I am doing breakfast dishes, the sun makes sharp shadows of the fence wire like long, neat stitches binding us to this place. Tup and I have enough sense to know that we are blessed people. You cannot know what will come. Once, when Sonny and Dodie were just toddlers, both of them locked themselves in the milk room by mistake. Tup was busy in the north pasture. I could hear the tractor in the distance working. That must have been the year he bought the new tractor, 1938, and I was the one who was supposed to keep an eye on the children. I always did. I learned as soon as Sonny was born that when you have a child, your own life diminishes to just about nothing, and willingly so. Growing up, you are so full of dreams of what your life will be and how you will use all those years that sit like a promise, and always it is you at the center. And then you get married and those dreams change, but still you have big ideas about it all. Maybe the farm will extend, or you'll have enough money to take the train to Sarasota one winter, or you'll be paid by folks to cut up and sew dresses and skirts you've learned how to copy from the magazines. We can't ever know what will come. You meet a man and marry him and find out whether you made a good choice or not. If you did, you love each other and work hard, and then you have your first baby, and whatever it was you ever dreamed about changes the first time you hold him and feed him and watch him study your face. Sonny came when I was 19 years old, and I forgot forever any of those things I had ever thought I wanted. I felt as if I were God, making such a good world for our children. When Sonny came, and then Dodie, and later Beston, I was willing to leave the life Tup and I had and let my children take that place. I am more than willing. So that morning, the children were out back with me while I hung out the clothes. This was before Beston was born, and about the last year before we got the washer. I heated water on the wood stove in the kitchen and lugged it out to the back dooryard and did the washing on the pump platform. The kids liked laundry day. It was all play for them, dipping little cups into the water and pouring it out on the dry gravel. On a warm morning, you could watch the water disappear like a stain from cloth. I pumped cold water for rinsing and poured it into the tub, and Sonny and Dodie would beg me to dump some of it over their heads, with them shrieking and running away. It was a game we played every laundry day, all summer. The kids would get soaked and muddy, so it was all a good morning for them. Well, that day they got bored, I guess, and wandered off without my realizing. I never even noticed they were gone. I had carried the basket of wrung clothes over to the lines and was pinning them up when I suddenly heard nothing but the breeze rustling the wet cloth and the soft sound of the distant tractor. Like a terrible dream, your worst dream, that moment of inattention when you had forgotten for 1 minute that you were the mother, the one whose single purpose it was to keep your children safe, and that awful silence that jolted you back. I remember feeling so helpless, as if I couldn't fix this no matter what I might do. I ran to the kitchen door and then back to the pump, and then turned toward the noise of the tractor so far off in the field, as if Tup could pluck my children out of the air. I needed Tup to give me a shake and tell me to think. And then I was back inside myself again, and I could say, they can't have gotten to the creek yet, so wherever they are all right. After that, it was just a story like all mothers have, that cold fear when your child takes off from your sight for just long enough to scare you into thinking you have lost him forever, and you know you are a terrible mother who cannot keep your children safe. I called and called, Sonny, Dodie, turning slowly in place so my voice would carry across the whole yard. And then I heard Sonny's little yell from the milkroom, Mama, Mama. As scared as I was, I heard the panic children feel when they have moved beyond the reach of their mother's protection. I'm coming, I called, running to the barn. You silly ducks, where are you? I called in a false and cheerful voice to reassure them and to dispel the terror that had caught me, to assert that this was just an incident, a small event Tup and I would laugh over with relief when we shared supper. I could hear the door of the milkroom rattle, and when I lifted the latch and pushed the door open, my children pressed their tearful faces into my apron, their arms clasped around my legs, the sweet animal smell of fresh milk tumbling out the door around us. My silly ducks, I said, stroking their tight little shoulders and hair wet from our laundry day game. It's all right. But I still remember the sound of my cries out into that sudden silence and of Tup's tractor off in the north pasture, so far away. So that's Doris. Doris is a very strong character. She is extraordinarily capable. She grows an enormous vegetable garden, puts up all their food, tends the house, tends the children, tends the hens. And her her faith in her capability is very strong, but there is an undercurrent for her, a feeling that there is something that might come to this family if she isn't careful. And she expresses that fear in quiet ways in several places in the book. So Dodie also has a voice. There are two people in the family that do not have a voice in this book. One is Sonny, the older boy, and Beston, the younger boy. I had to make a decision, I think, as a writer about how many voices readers can hang with. 5 is a lot. There had to be people who did not speak in this book. And so I made the decision that Dodie, that girl in the middle of the two boys, was going to be kind of our reporter. She was going to be the child that could speak of the children's experience through all of this. She is very intelligent, feisty, also very capable, mature. And her mother says about her at one point, Dodie has such a capacity to love. And she certainly does. That's she shows us that throughout the book. So this is Dodie speaking. She is going to tell us 2 stories back to back here. Every spring, Daddy brings us all the way down to the mouth of Center Creek, where it opens to the sea at Carey Cove. We go down at night when the moon is full, but it's very cloudy, so everything looks like it's glowing from inside, trees and fences and even barns, silver and lit up by a light you can't see. This is the time to dip for smelt, which we love to get and love to eat. Daddy doesn't tell us ahead of time, and then he's by our beds in the middle of the night whispering, want to get some smelt. And we know we have about 5 minutes to wake up enough to get into our chore clothes and our boots and our hats and mittens because it's very cold on chore night, and climb into the warm truck. This year it was the end of March when Daddy believed the time was right. He put the radio up high in the truck and sang till the end of time, as if he was the happiest man in the world. He reached over and squeezed the funny spot above Sonny's knee so hard it made Sonny laugh out loud. And then Daddy told him, wake up, we have smelt waiting for us. And he held Sonny's hand. Sonny's grown big for that, but still, whenever Daddy is in the truck with one of us, even Sonny, he holds our hand. We drove on the dark roads all the way to Chase Mills and turned down a tote road Daddy's grandfather showed him a long time ago, and we parked the truck. The wide cove spread silent beyond us. We carried the buckets and dip nets on the path through the black woods, and then we could hear our creek all the way down there near the ocean, roaring down the hillside and running out to the bay, while all the smelt tried to run upstream 5 miles to lay their eggs. Daddy said we were there to put them in our buckets and give them a lift. By now we were awake and cold before we even got into the water. Daddy put the big metal buckets on the rocks along the stream and told Sonny to take the net and move into the tumbling current. Daddy clicked on the flashlight, and there they were, pushing desperately upstream. He chose the night just right. So many little silver fish packed side to side, they made their own river of light in the stream. Sonny braced himself against the hard run of water and swept the net into the current, and it was full in a flash. Daddy held the bucket out over the creek to receive the shimmering fish, and again, and again. And then Sonny and my father had filled the first bucket, and it was my turn, always in order with everything, Sonny, Dodie, Beston. And I waded out to just below the tops of my boots. I could feel the fish slither and thump against my shins, wanting so much to go home to make their babies. It's not something you have to think about, Dodie, my father always says. Everything is part of the good world, a perfect system, and us eating these fish is a part of that order. You can't be making every little fish something you need to save. My father is right. It felt like the most natural thing in the world to be standing in the icy water with fish bumping against me, trying to get past, and me reaching in among them and hauling them up, the water dripping in the silver light, the fish slapping silver, the trees glowing silver, my father and my brothers dark shadows with silver in their hair, their hands silver reaching to help me, the fish sliding into my bucket so I could place the net again. Beston's turn, then Daddy's, and then we each carried our bucket along the rocky path up to the truck. Daddy helping Beston, but letting him feel that he was doing it himself. And we didn't speak along that path or at the truck or on the long ride home. Daddy had the radio low now and the heater high, and we settled in close to each other for warmth and because we were happy and sleepy and satisfied. Daddy held Beston's hand, letting go to shift, and drove slowly so we could watch the woods and the farms in all their dark quiet and peace. Mom was up when we got home, nodding and smiling as we lugged our buckets to the sink. No one talked. We washed our hands in warm water and threw our clothes in the basket in the shed, and Sonny and Beston went to their room and I went to mine, climbing back into our cold beds that were soon warm. No one would wake us for school in the morning. The sun was up and the kitchen was warm and the fish were slit and gutted and in the chest freezer when we came down. Why don't the fish come to our farm? I asked my father once. Why do we have to go so far to find them? He said, everything we will ever need or want is close enough, Dodie. Are you telling me you don't like my singing in the truck? On cloudy full moon nights, I will remember all my life that soft silver light and the four of us standing in our creek, so far from home, but Center Creek still, no matter what, the fish rushing into our net and my welcoming mother waiting for us at home. And she moves into another story. Once, when Best was too little, Sonny called to me from the upper hayloft. He was allowed up there by then, but I still wasn't. A few times I snuck up when Mom and Daddy were busy and thought we were just working or playing in the old horse stall. So I knew how nice it was up there, especially in the spring when the hay was gone from that loft and mostly gone from the lower one, so we could move around in the soft chaff and sit in the beam of dust light that came through the big window at the top of the barn wall, as if God was shining on us and everything we were doing or ever would do. Come see what I found, Sonny called down to me in his quiet, serious voice. The loft ladders were very steep and it was hard for me to swing up onto the floor from the last rung because you had no place to hold on to, and it felt like the ladder was going to pull away and lean through the air all the way to the barn floor below. Sonny knew that and came down to the first loft and held my hand when I got off, and then he went ahead up the top loft ladder and held my hand again, and then he led me all the way to the very back under the sloping roof. Look, he whispered. We knelt in the soft hay leavings. There was a small indentation in the hay, a rough circle packed down with strands of hay laid up like a make-believe roof that you could look right through like a playhouse. And inside were 4 tiny pink kittens. We watched them, but all they could do so far was lift their heads from the nest a little way and then rest. Let's take them into the kitchen and feed them, I whispered, but Sonny held my hand back. No, they aren't kittens, Dodie, he whispered. They're baby rats. I could see now that they weren't kittens. I touched them anyway. Their skin wrinkled when I drew my finger along. It was as soft as anything I had ever touched. Their eyes were still closed. They had pointy tails, not even as long as my finger, and pointy faces like a cartoon of mice. They laid close by each other. Where's the mother? I whispered to my brother. Getting food so she can make milk to feed them, he said. Here. He picked one up and put it in my hand. He took one, and we sat down next to each other, stroking the warm, tiny bodies. Daddy will drown them if he finds them, he said. I had pulled lots of dead rats out of my father's traps and thrown their stiff, creased bodies in the incinerator barrel. I had never thought about their bodies burning along with the trash. I had never thought about their babies. I knew that Daddy wouldn't be up in this loft again until June when he cut the new hay. He'd never find them. We sat for a long time, our hands hot, the loft glowing with the yellow light that came in the high windows and filled the place under the roof every day. We couldn't see down, only up into the rafters, whole trees cut from this land by someone connected to us from a long, long time ago. Sonny brought his closed hand close to his mouth and breathed in, smelling the warm air. "It's okay," he whispered, "it's okay." His short blonde hair was the color of the hay around us, the color of the light that came to us, like light through a tunnel in the floating dust. "What will we do?" I asked my brother. He was quiet. We put the baby rats back in the nest and sat back watching. "I wonder where the mother is," I said. "Watching us," Sonny said. "She's waiting to come back to her babies. They must be hungry." Sonny held the ladder and helped me swing my leg out into space to catch the first rung. From here, we could see down past the lower loft and all the way to the barn floor below. It was swept neat. Nothing blocked the center aisle between the rows of stanchions and pens. Sonny had laid loose hay in the racks that morning, ready for the cows to come home tonight to be milked and to rest before moving out again in the morning to the orderly green pastures that fed them. The water buckets were filled with fresh water and the hose was coiled by the spigot. The huge old bins were full of sweet grain. The scoops hung on nails next to my father's careful charts of feeding measures for every calf and cow. We climbed back down to the floor of our barn. That night at supper, while I kept our secret, Sonny was quiet. And then he told our father we had found a nest of baby rats in the upper loft. "Well," my father finally said. He didn't ask us what I was doing up there. "Well," he said, "I'm very sorry to hear that. That's a very sad piece of news. I appreciate your telling me, Sonny. You're a good boy." When the sun goes down, I knew the barn lofts go darker than the darkest woods. I knew the mother would get away, and I knew she would make more babies that would look to me just like these. But in the night, I could feel still the softness of their skin. I could feel Sonny lying in his bed across the hall, and I knew my father was right about him. I knew that I would not have told. I would have let the babies be safe, and they would have grown to be the rats that eat and soil our grain, the rats we have to kill in our traps. I wondered about me then, having kept this from my father. Was I a bad girl? The next morning, we never even looked up to the high space inside the barn. We had a lot of chores to do, sweeping and dragging the hose from bucket to bucket and carrying kindling wood from my father's pile to the kitchen. The sun was out, a good spring day, and it filled the place under the roof with its golden, dusty light. So that's Dodie telling us the childhood stories. She is a great storyteller, and she has, I think, an uncommon love for both of her brothers, her older and younger brother, and speaks about them with great love and great respect. She's actually, during this time, it doesn't show up in those two small stories, but she is suffering because Sonny is actually getting old enough. He's 12 and then 13 and then 14, and he's old enough to be done really with playing with his kid sister and even younger brother. And he is moving into a very interior life, and he has friends from school that he likes to spend time with now. And Dodie is feeling it acutely. Her mother tells her that this is a phase and that Sonny will return to them, but she doesn't have faith in that. She's missing her brother a lot. And that story comes out of that missing. So this is Tup. This is the final voice in this round of Doris, Dodie, and Tup telling their stories. This is Tup. He is a very hard worker on the farm, but periodically the family finds a way to play. They actually get away together and they play, and this is one of those days. Last winter, on a cold, clear, early January day, Doris and I organized our chores so we could take the afternoon skating with the children on Johns River in South Brookfield. The ice was thick, and we had had no snow since the cold weather really set in, so the ice was smooth and open. I truly loved to skate, and the day felt as exciting to me as to my children. This was the place my father brought his own children when the drudgery of his work life overwhelmed him in the dark early days of winter. That's not what drove me there, not too much work or the wrong work, but everyone needs a sense of cutting free once in a while, and Doris was always quick to say yes. She and Dodie put together thermoses of hot chocolate, and Beston and Sonny brought the sled from the shed. They waxed the steel runners with a candle stub and tied a new length of rope to the steering bar. All our outer clothes went behind the truck seat. Dodie got the place beside me and my hand, and the truck filled with happy nonsense and chatter. John's River is really just a wide, slow creek with overhanging trees and brush protecting muskrat and beaver bank dens. I've always thought it was a very good place, especially for children, because it spools out forward, not like a pond or a lake surrounding you, but a river of ice inviting you away. I love that illusion, that sense of the possibility of going on and away, turning your back and giving yourself over to what you can't see ahead. The muddy landing was frozen, and someone, probably a trapper, had laid a good log down for sitting and a stone break for a small fire. Doris and I helped tighten the laces of the children's skates, Sonny always in new ones, and Dodie and Beston in his hand-me-downs. Dodie complained at the start of each winter about wanting figure skates like her mother's, but she had mastered hockey skates and seemed content once she got on the ice the first time each year. I seldom see Doris in slacks, but I complimented her, saying, well, Mrs. Center, you are looking very handsome today. I could count on her to laugh, and the children too. Oh, but I could change into a beautiful princess at midnight, she said with her open smile, if a handsome prince decided to kiss me. My wife is a flirt, which no man ever complains about. Off we went, the sun glinting from the ice and the bare trees and the blue sky itself. I was happy the minute my skates hit the ice. This is something we never forget, the feeling of ice carved by our skates with a rasping swoosh. It is a certain kind of freedom to not make steps, but instead to slide a leg forward, the other leg, the first again, and find yourself suddenly almost free of the world, skimming smoothly and effortlessly into the light. I felt a kind of euphoria, a real elation, and wondered for a minute if my children knew this kind of freedom yet. We circled each other, Beston reaching sometimes for Doris's hand or mine, Sonny and Dodie breaking away and swooping along, their arms outstretched, their faces receiving the clean winter light. No one spoke or called out, our skate blades scraping loudly. The children dragged the sled down onto the ice and took turns, two of them stepping into the loop of rope like a harness and pulling the third fast along the river in wide, sweeping arcs. And now they shrieked and laughed and taunted one another. I watched Doris pull out of their way and start her silent remembering of a girl's ballet on ice, the twirls and little leaps and hips swishing side to side to go backward. She smiled, embarrassed to be watched, but didn't stop, which pleased me. And I turned away and did my own remembering, the boy hard at hockey roaring low across the ice, feet pointing out to catch the ice and drive the body forward, faster and faster. And when I gained a curve in the river, suddenly the sounds behind me became muffled, and I slowly straightened and focused on the simple, smooth glide of skates on good ice, the memory so strong I had nothing to say about it. And I lifted my face to the sun, and swoosh, 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 in rhythm, I followed the shining ice. The noise and shouts fell behind me. Daddy, Daddy, where are you going? Dodie called, and the memory of skating and this moment of skating became the same act, and I was gone. I let myself be gone, Dodie's call left behind. I went forward and I was alone. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The sun was ahead of me. Nothing was behind me. There were no needs and no expectations and nothing waiting for me. The river curved right and left and farther right. A ribbon laid here for me alone. A crow called from the top of a towering old stave oak, and the sun shone purple against him. I did not rush. taking the river as mine, the silence as mine, the emancipating light as mine, my legs strong and the cold air now stinging my lungs, all mine with nothing secluding me or hindering me or binding me, and so I did not stop. John's river winds smaller and smaller, and finally I knew that I had come a very long way from my responsibilities, and I felt a pang of worry that grew as I turned and pushed my way back. Now it felt like hard work, and the worry grew to a guilt that was crushing and that I resented and resisted. The light had changed, a warning. And so I found my family seated on the log, the day gone and cold, the hot drinks gone, the truck keys in my pocket. Doris said nothing, and I resented that too. The children told me that they were very frightened that I had gone through the ice, and I said sharply, I didn't go through the ice. I have more sense than that. We rode home in silence with no one's hand in mine, and although I knew that was a child's rebuke, I was not filled with sorrow about it as I might have been. Where had I gone, I wondered, that felt so distant from this family I love and so sovereign? We are always forgiven, and we made our way again and then again to an afternoon of skating, but we never returned to John's River, as if keeping me from it would preserve us from some sort of sundering. So I have one more story that Top can tell us. It's not very long. Maybe I'll read that last section. One evening last winter, I came in from milking and stripped to my underwear in the shed. For some reason, after all these years, this stripping down still amuses my wife and children. In fact, I enjoy this moment each evening. We all do. It marks the end of our work and the start of conversation, all of us together now with one purpose. And so I grin or growl or whip around in astonishment, and the children scream and laugh, and Doris comes beside me and fills the sink for me with hot water. This night, Sonny showed me an article about tortoises that live 100 years. The other children were interested, and so he shared the photographs with them and read out loud. After supper, while Dodie and Doris cleared the table and did the dishes, Beston and Sonny went into the front room, and I could hear the clatter of Chinese marbles on the tin board. Sonny moves between boy and man, hour by hour. I am glad he has these younger children to invite him back to play. I brought the carburetor from the tractor to the kitchen table and spread newspaper. I like evening chores. They have a beginning and an end, a clear-cut purpose. I like to use hand tools. I opened the old wooden box a center long before me had made to hold a basic set of tools, screwdrivers and pliers and rasps, and a hammer with its handle carved from chestnut from this land. The screwdriver's tip is shiny from use. Dodie's chatter with Doris was like a chant behind my work. The slosh of dishwater, the gentle clink of china, the click of seconds on the wall clock, the marbles on tin from another room. These tools in other men's hands, in this room, at this table, their children at ease or troubled, the parents at ease or troubled, the seconds and minutes and hours and days and years. These evenings bring great peace, and yet I was filled suddenly with an ache that startled me and then scared me. How could I not name its source? The tip of the screwdriver slipped and gouged my hand slightly, and I watched as if it were someone else's hand as the tiny drop of blood rose and slid in a thin line down my palm. I raised my eyes to the kitchen, to my wife and my daughter, to the early dark of winter beyond, hearing the gentle lull of my son's voices from down the hall, the water running at the sink, and I was so frightened I laid the tool on the table and moved quickly out the door to the shed and outside into the cold, hard air, holding my bleeding hand apart from me, standing under the sweep of stars, weeping from a place I did not know. So that was Tup, starting his story.
Yay, intriguing. I'm intrigued to hear all these voices and the sort of impending sense of something else out there that might be happening.
Yes, there's
Do you
so,
have any questions?
sorry, yes.
Just wondering if any of the attendees, Jessica? Okay, let me unmute you and you can chat with Meredith.
Hey Meredith, I took some of your creative nonfiction classes at UNH many
Yes,
years
you
ago.
did.
So
Hello,
I am
Jessica.
so excited for this new novel. It sounds super beautiful. I'm
Thank
really
you
excited
so
to dig
much.
in.
What a lovely surprise. Thank
I
you.
know, it's so funny to be on this call right now. So I'm interested in the fact that you're coming from like a creative nonfiction memoir background, which is the story of I and a viewpoint of I, like that's all you're responsible for. And now you have this beautiful novel, which has not just one, but three different viewpoints and three different memories. So I'm interested in a little bit more like, what was that experience like? Was it freeing, or were there a whole new set of limitations and sort of responsibilities to other selves?
That's a wonderful question. And you know, it's true. Each of these people write in the I, right? They are each writing their own memoir in a sense. They're speaking their own experience. So that's a wonderful, really wonderful context. When I finished my memoir was such an intimate book. And I wrote it at a time that I thought nobody would ever read it. And that actually gave me great freedom. So I wrote this book, that memoir, very, very intimately. And after I traveled with the book for a couple of years, I ended up talking not just about the book, but about my life a great deal for over a period of a couple of years. And I made the decision that I would, although I always imagined myself a nonfiction writer, I thought, okay, I'm going to move to fiction and find a little bit of cover in fiction. And I had a lot to learn. I had not written any fiction. I read a great deal and understood what fiction was, but actually making that happen on the page was quite a move for me. But I understood that really I have such faith in narrative writing, telling our stories, and fictive stories or memoir stories, nonfiction stories. It seems to me that that act is very similar. Your question about whether it was freeing, I have fallen in love with fiction writing. At first it was very intimidating because anything can happen, absolutely anything. It's anything, literally anything can happen to anybody. And there are no parameters, there are no guardrails on that. And I did find it overwhelming. But once I finally grasped that anything is in me. It's already here, and I simply need to trust in my ability to write the things that interest me on the page through these characters. And so it's an interesting thing I find with this novel, that anything actually exposed me as I was allowed to explore these characters and their lives, their joys and love, but also the sad events that happened to them. I also did that in a very intimate way. And I realized as I closed out the book that I am actually in some ways much more exposed in this novel than I was in my memoir. I think the very act of anything being possible means that I wrote my heart and my mind quite freely on the page. So, yeah. Thanks, Jessica. It's wonderful.
Thank you for your question, Jessica. Anyone else have anything they want to ask Meredith? I'm curious about the house as a character. You mentioned that it has sort of a mind and a space of its own. Was the house inspired by any particular setting, and how did that sort of come about as the house becoming a large part of the story?
You know, the house and the farm are not known to me. I made them up completely. But I think there's one thing, you know, I've lived in small New England towns all my life. My family, all going back generations, came from Maine. And somehow it's a known life, that farm life. Everybody knows farmers, everybody knows farms. And so it was familiar in a way, although not actually known. I had never experienced it. But there is a feeling for me in this book that I am actually speaking a longing that I have felt all my life for that world. It's as if, you know, I was able to write a life in a world that was that I always wished I had had. And I didn't realize until I was well into the book that what I was doing was writing that kind of nostalgic vision of an agrarian life in a small town on a successful farm. So, and the house specifically is, you know, we learn the rooms of the house, the front room, the porch, and the kitchen specifically, and Doris and Tup's bedroom also. But these are spaces, so much living happens in those spaces through the seasons. And we know, we learn the house in those seasons. So the house kind of marks those seasons for us.
I was intrigued by the character of Doris, being a mother myself, and you reading a passage about her losing her children and that sort of universal sense of fear that mothers feel. And just over the years of being a mother for 13 years now, just the little stories and personal tragedies that almost every single mother has gone through. Yes. I wonder if you could talk anything else, anything more about Doris's character, and if you see any other kind of universals of motherhood in her and how those might relate to other mothers or to yourself as a mother.
I think that Doris, I think you're right. I think that Doris, people have commented on Doris's sense that there is something outside, something beyond this farm, something beyond the home that she cannot keep at bay, that poses potential harm. And she has a feeling that she calls their home a stronghold. This is a place that she feels she can protect her children from. She refers to this farm as an island and the family as an island. We are an island. And out there is where something she can't name has the capacity to do harm. And I think that all mothers feel that way. I think most mothers do. I think mothering involves a sense of a kind of overwhelming responsibility for our children, and a sense that we are not up to the task of keeping our children safe in all circumstances, that there is something out there. And I think Doris imagines it quite literally as something beyond the farm, something outside their land and their place. But I think that mothers very commonly have this feeling, that a feeling of dread for in the midst of all the joy and all the daily obligations of love. There is also this kind of quiet dread that's there, that something awful might happen. And I think that she gives voice to that.
So without giving away too much, is her sense of dread warranted or unfounded? Can you say?
I will tell you that, yeah, something very, very hard comes at this family. They become profoundly challenged by a tragedy, and we watch them move through time as they struggle to either make their way back to some kind of safety together or fail to do that. Yes.
Okay, we've got Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Did you have a question?
Hi. Yes. Well, first of all, I just have to say how good it is to see you, Meredith. Meredith was one of my mentors in life, and a dear friend of mine. I'm just so happy to be here, and I can't wait.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Yep. I had a question. It's really good also to hear your voice, both, you know, the audible, hearing your voice, but also in your writing. It's familiar to me from reading when we had our writing group. And I was wondering if the fiction is something you're going to do more of. Are you working on something else? Where are you going to go from here?
Yes, I do love nonfiction. I think that the essay is really, I might make the claim that the essay is the most elegant and challenging form. I think I revere it. I think it's a very, very beautiful form. And so, I have a list of essays, personal essays that I would like to write and draw together into a collection. They would not be as memoir-ish as my memoir was. So I've told those big stories once, and I'm done with those. But I have a lot of other personal essays that I would like to write. But I am, again, working on a novel. I love this form, and I love the freedom that it gives me. I also love the challenges. I find that in fiction, there are many, many more problems, it seems to me, in fiction writing. Everything is up in the air. You're constructing everything, the structure, the organization, who your characters are, and none of that is true with memoir. In memoir, I think you're choosing which stories to tell and how to tell those. But in fiction, you really are solving every problem from the ground up. And I love that challenge. I just really enjoy it. So I'm working on another novel. I am only probably 60 or 70 pages into it. And I haven't been writing for the last several weeks as my book has been coming out. I've been too busy to write. And it's actually been a good time. It's allowed this novel to sit and collect my thinking a little bit. And I realize that I need to tell the story from a different point in this narrator's life. And that's been very productive for me. So I'll go back having a better understanding of exactly who this narrator is. She's not the person I thought she was. She's going to have to be much older than I thought she would be. So I'm enjoying that. And I actually think that I might go back to the centers. I hated leaving this book. I came to love these people and this place to a degree that frightened me, honestly. They became very real for me. And as they go through these difficulties, I felt their grief so profoundly and so personally that I often cried. I went through a summer of really a very kind of just heartbreak. And I knew that all I needed to do was rewrite the story, not have these events happen, but I didn't do that. I stayed with the story as I understood it. And I felt this is the story that had to be written. But I love these people, and I love this place, this life that they've built. And I have given some serious thought to returning to them, perhaps to Beston, this younger brother who does not have a voice in the book at all. His sister Dodie speaks for him in many, many places. We watch him, but he doesn't speak. He doesn't tell us anything really about himself. And so part of me thinks that I could go back. I'd like to go back. He's actually a very talented musician, and I might go back and move into that life that he created. So yes, I think about novels, think about stories. Yeah.
And when you're writing them, did you kind of go in sequence with the chapters, or did you find yourself jumping around, starting in the beginning and then maybe working a little bit on the end? How is the process for your fiction writing?
Yeah, no, with this book, with Beneficience, I understood from the beginning that I was going to have this series of voices. I started in 1947. I made decisions about how many years would have elapsed before we come back in and they tell us where they are at that moment in time. So I made that decision. But except for that, my habit is to put on my Gregorian chants on on iTunes and tune out the world, listen to my Gregorian chants, and I slide into this other world very easily, and I just tell the next story that's waiting to be told. It's a pretty delicious experience for me. We'll see whether that happens with other books, but this book was just an extraordinary experience of writing.
Thanks.
Yeah.